Hello, and welcome to STEM at Home with Newton's Road for 6th and 7th grade students. We are so glad that you are able to come today. This is your chance to learn from some experts in our region and each other as we continue to learn at home. My name is Barb Tremott. I'm the Executive Director of Newton's Road. And we're a regional nonprofit supporting STEM learning and career exploration. I also have with me today our Michigan Tech University intern, Annalisa Wiesner. Wave, Annalisa. Our special guest today is Greg Johnson. He's a retired NASA astronaut and Air Force pilot, and today a national consultant for STEM education and space exploration enterprises. And Greg made 2 trips to the International Space Station as an astronaut. And we are also very fortunate to have Greg as the vice chair of our Newton's Road Board of Directors. We'll come back to Greg in a minute, but hey, Greg, wave hi to everybody.
Hello, everyone.
So this session will be recorded and available on our Newton's Road Facebook Live and YouTube channels soon after the show. And before we get started with Greg, Matt is going to give us a little helpful details about Zoom tools. He's with Traverse Area Community Media. Over to you, Matt.
Hello, everybody. My name is Matt Kern. I'm the station manager at Traverse Area Community Media. We're helping host this Zoom webinar today, and it looks like we do have a couple of attendees here on the Zoom app. So I'll just go over quickly how you can, a couple different ways that you can interact today. So you'll see if you're on a computer or on a smartphone or tablet, you'll see that there's a Q&A button. It may be at the bottom of your screen and it may be at the top, depending on what kind of device you're on. You can go ahead and ask questions of the panelists today using the Q&A button. You could also use the chat button down there and ask through chat so that everybody could see it. And if you'd like to be called upon and have your microphone unmuted, you can use the hand raise button. And if you are on a smartphone or tablet, that hand raise button is in the top right corner. You just tap on the 3 dots that say more, tap on that, and then you'll see raise hand. And then if you're on a computer, it will be on the participants panel. If you don't see a list of participants on the right-hand side of the Zoom app, you can go down to the bottom center of your screen, click on participants, and then you'll see a hand raise button in the bottom right-hand corner of your Zoom application. So that's a little bit about the Zoom app. We'll also do our best to answer any questions that are asked over the Newton's Road Facebook live stream as well. So that's all I've got. Back to you, Barb.
Great, thank you. And next we're going to share a little bit more about Newton's Road. So Annalisa is going to share our website. And we're really excited about this year. We're celebrating 10 years of working to ensure that all of the youth in our 5-county region have access to quality STEM learning and career exploration opportunities that will help all of you to become great problem solvers. Go ahead and raise your hand if you are familiar with Newton's Road, if you are in the Zoom. I see Nicole is, and hopefully some other people are as well. Oh, there we go, Destiny, thank you. So on our homepage, you can see, if you scroll down a little bit, there is a link to our monthly newsletter. And this is a great way to stay abreast of all of the happenings. And it says, join our mailing list. And then you'll get our monthly newsletter telling about all of our events that are happening for us and other STEM providers around our region. And then on our calendar tab, we have updated it to have both live and anytime STEM activity views. And so the default shows both calendars, and you can select to just see what's live happening in our region from Newton's Road and other providers. Like you can see some Tattle STEM things going on there as well right now. And you can also select just to see the anytime. So these are activities if you want to do with your together and your family, or just by yourself, given your age, then you can quickly pull up something that would be a lot of fun to do anytime during the day. And we also have a Facebook page as well, and many of you are joining us from Facebook Live, so we're really excited about that as well. Okay, now we're going to circle back to Greg. Hey, Greg, I can't wait to learn more about living in space and the careers that support space exploration. For those of you that are in the Zoom, don't remember that you can raise your hand if you want to speak or answer, put questions in the chat. Also, Facebook Live, we'll try to answer your questions as well. Thanks. Over to you, Greg.
Okay, well, hello, everyone. I'm down in Houston. I've got a little bit more of a suntan. I've been riding my bicycle every single day. And another founder of Newton's Road, Bill Myers, and I have been challenging each other to make sure we get at least 100 push-ups done every day. So I'm actually getting in better shape here in quarantine than I normally am when I'm flying all over the place. But I'm thrilled to be here. We're in our piano room here in Houston that has now been converted into a studio. I've done a lot of these kind of talks. I was talking to some elementary school kids in the UK this morning, actually. So it's been a lot of fun. You know, science, technology, engineering, and math, all these career fields are so important in our world today. And technology is something that everyone around the world has become increasingly digitally fluent. You know, as we learn how to mess around with Zoom and work off all the various features. I was messing around with this earlier and, oh, now I'm in outer space. Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I had to do that. But you know, technology is fun, and we're learning as a planet that we are globally interconnected. And what we do in Michigan, in Ohio, in the United States, and overseas affects everyone. And so that's something to think about. Okay, so I've got some slides that we can talk about with the various STEM careers. Next slide, please. The first slide I kind of captured, and we're going to get to in just a sec. Here we go. So that's sort of the space program in a nutshell. And what it is it's a collection of all the various STEM fields that we have here on the ground as well. For me, I was excited at first about math and then science. But of course, technology and engineering, the space station in the center of the screen is probably the greatest engineering achievement of our civilization. 16 different nations around the world took part in building the space station. And then to the right is Mars, and there's so much science to be learned on Mars. And of course, the inspiration that we had in the Apollo days 50 years ago. I was alive back then. I know you all weren't alive back then, but it was a really exciting time for our nation and the world. Next slide. I was at my grandparents' house on July 20th, 1969, when Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon. And that was the inspiration for me as a 7-year-old. And I guess what I'd like to say is I didn't say, no, it can't happen. I said, wow, maybe it could happen. My brother and sister laughed at me. But if you say, no, you can't do it, then that's a guarantee you can't do it. And in this world, we have an increasingly fruitful land of opportunity, both in our country and all around the world. Next slide. I started off as a pilot. So I was a pilot in the US Air Force for 25 years, and airplanes, just like spaceships, cover the gamut from science, technology, engineering, and math. My hair was a little longer back then. I look a little bit like my two sons when they were 18 years old. And oh, by the way, my oldest son turned 27 today. Today's his birthday. So we're going to have to celebrate that tomorrow because he's working up in Houston today. Next slide. My dream of becoming an astronaut came to fruition when I was in my late 30s. This is 1998. We had 31 astronauts selected for that class. We've had over 500 astronauts and cosmonauts now that have actually been to outer space. But you've been alive I call you the space generation, because every breath that you've taken here on the earth, we've been living and working in space every single day of your lives. And so there's so much exciting stuff in our futures and in your futures in STEM fields, including going into space. Next slide. I'm going to talk quickly about my 2 shuttle flights. This was 2008. We had a Japanese astronaut, and we were taking up part of the International Space Station, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about later. Next slide. That's a spacewalk, and you can see our beautiful planet below. The new module that's silver at the top of your screen was manufactured in Japan, and it had never been connected to any part of the space station until we actually took it up to space. So the engineering feats of our engineers and scientists all around the world collectively helped us build this beautiful facility in space. Next slide. We put together Mr. Dexter. That's a Canadian robotic arm, and you can see the shadow behind it on the huge solar arrays of the space station. Next slide. And that's what the space station looked like in 2008. So that was a little over 12 years ago. I was up there in Easter, actually, of 2008. You might notice that on the right side of the picture, we're missing one of the solar arrays that were going to come up in subsequent flights, in later flights. The space, we were building the space station while we were living in it. And so for that 13-year period, what started off as 2 little modules ended up being the entirety of the space station. Next slide. That was my second and final space flight. That's our Star Trek copycat pose. And you could see Mark Kelly in front. He was the commander. And I was Spock without the pointy ears. But all of us were up there on this final flight of Endeavour. Next slide. It was a day launch, and the shuttle launches were absolutely incredible. But, a lot of people thought that when the shuttle program retired and went to museums, that the space program was over, but it couldn't be further from the truth. Actually, we're launching a new vehicle this month. On May 27th, we're launching into space from US soil for the first time in 9 years. But we had been flying on the Russians' Soyuz vehicle to get up to the space station. And of course, the space station has been orbiting around the Earth every 90 minutes for the last 20 years. Next slide. Blasting through the clouds. This was taken by one of my F-15 buddies. Next slide. Arriving up to the International Space Station. Now, the space shuttle was like a semi-truck that you see driving down the highway. All the stuff we took up with us was in the back, and all the people are in front. This particular flight, like I said, it was right at the end of the space shuttle program. We were taking up some important experiments and supplies, spares, so that the space station could operate with backup systems while we were building this new vehicle that we're testing later this month. Next slide. We brought up the alpha magnetic spectrometer. It's one of the amazing particle detector experiments that we have on the space station. It's now collected, next slide, about 150 billion cosmic particles at the very top of the space station. These are particles that we can't experience here on the Earth because these particles disintegrate when they go through our atmosphere. So we're learning a lot about our universe, especially the dark matter and dark energy that you can't see with telescopes on the AMS. Next slide. There's a spacewalk, and this gives you a sense of scale of how immense the space station is. There's a spacewalker hanging it out over there to the right, and you can see the AMS clearly on the right, and I hope he doesn't kick it because it's a very expensive piece of equipment. And there's another spacewalker camouflaged along the backbone, the truss of the space station, right in the center of your picture. Next slide. I like this photo because it reminds me of a photo taken when I was 7 years old back in 1969. You may remember the famous photo where Neil Armstrong took a photograph of Buzz Aldrin, but the reflection on his visor was Neil himself. And that's one of the only photos we have of Neil Armstrong on the surface of the moon. Next slide. And that's what the space station looked like in 2011, about 9 years ago. I actually was up in space right now, celebrating my son's 18th birthday when I was up in space. I actually called him the night before his birthday, if you can believe that. He said, "Dad, I'm not 18 yet," because I was in a different time zone. But now I'm going to share my screen, if that's okay, Annalisa, and I want to talk a little bit about the space station, and then we can take some questions. So here we go. Let's see if I do this thing right. And I'm going to go over to this guy right here. It should share. And what you should see is the International Space Station rotating around. This is a rendering of the space station. It's not an actual photograph, but it clearly shows all the different modules that we installed onto the space station over 13 years. That module right there was the one we took up on my first flight. The Japanese laboratory complex are those 3 modules to the right of the foreground. And of course, you could see behind the Japanese lab is the big, wide truss, the backbone of the space station. The solar arrays, they're not even fully in view because they're so immense. The space station is about the size of a football field, and it took 35 or 40 shuttle flights, depending on how you count, to get each of those sections up there. Each one of the solar arrays went up on its own, so that represents 4 space shuttle flights, and of course, all these other modules fit perfectly in the back of the space shuttle. The cupola, you can see, is the big bay window that faces our Earth, and it's my favorite module to look at our beautiful planet from space. Absolutely spectacular looking at space, or looking at the Earth from the International Space Station. And so why do we have this space station? Well, for one, we have an outpost, a permanent outpost in outer space where we can learn to live long duration in this hostile environment. We've had missions 3 months, 6 months, even a year. Astronauts have lived and worked on the space station. My 2 shuttle flights were just 16 days, so they're relatively short compared to some of the missions that we take up to the International Space Station. But what's even more important about the space station is that we can do science up in 0 gravity. We can experience an environment where gravity is not pulling on everything, so we can study biological and physical processes differently than anywhere here on the planet. You know, we can turn the light switch off here on the planet, but you can't turn the gravity switch off. So the only place right now where we can study how cells interact and genes express. They're even talking about taking COVID up to the International Space Station to see if we can learn something about this terrible virus in this unusual laboratory in space. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and I want to show just a couple photos that I took when I was up on the International Space Station, and then we'll take some questions. So I'm stopping the share, and back to you, Annalisa. So let's see if anybody can guess what this photo is. The next slide. You're smiling. Oh, check that out. Almost everybody in Traverse City recognizes this photo. This is Long Lake. This is where my grandparents lived, and I hoped to be up there this month. But I guess it's not going to be till the end of next month before I get to travel back up to Traverse City. Next slide. It was taken about 4 seconds later. You can see the beautiful bays, the West and East Bay, and you can see Cherry Capital Airport, and of course, Traverse City right in the middle of the photograph. And then my last slide before questions. I was actually over New York State looking back with a 400 millimeter telephoto lens. It looks a little distorted, but I could still see Long Lake, and it was a good 2 or 3 minutes later. I mean, unbelievable, the views of our wonderful planet, spaceship Earth, when looking out the window from the space station. So with that, I think we have time for a little bit of Q&A, so let's get started. Is everybody having fun? I could tell you, I'm always having fun when I get to talk about the career that I've had in space, which involves science, technology, engineering, and math. And you don't have to be an astronaut to do it. As a matter of fact, there are thousands and thousands of people, of scientists and engineers and technicians who enable our space program to exist. All right, I'll stop talking and wait for a question. Who's moderating the questions?
So we do have a question. What do you
Okay.
think the future of space exploration is, from Nicole?
Well, it's unlimited. We are just scratching the surface. If you think about the great explorers from centuries ago, the conversation of Christopher Columbus with Queen Isabella trying to get government subsidy to find the New World. And we had no idea that we were going to have this wonderful economic, cultural continent that we have in North America. And it wasn't the East Indies, it was something else. And we found very interesting people with very different cultures. And so if Queen Isabella was worried about making a little bit of money or making a name for Spain or Portugal, you know, she wasn't thinking as big picture as what has happened. And there's so much of that to happen in the future. We're going to go to the moon pretty soon. We're going to go to Mars probably in our lifetimes. And hopefully we'll be able to figure out if we can get some of those scientists and researchers to design a propulsion system that could get us out of the solar system before we die of old age. That would be something, but it's going to happen. It's just a matter of when.
I also, I have another question here from Facebook Live. What was your favorite experience in space? And what was the scariest part of going into space?
Okay, I'll start with the last one. The scariest part was probably the launch, because I was trained for almost 10 years in various simulators all around the country, and nothing can simulate the explosive force of the space shuttle leaping off the ground like a wild animal. 7 million pounds of thrust as soon as the solid rocket boosters lit, and we were off for a ride. Mr. Toad's wild ride. My favorite experience in space is really heartwarming for me to remember. It actually makes me a little misty-eyed. I was sitting in the cupola, this beautiful bay window that I described that faces our planet, and I had a laptop that was floating in front of me. I was right over Chicago, so right over the Great Lakes, and my wife and 3 kids showed up on a video teleconference. They were in a control room down on the ground, and for 20 minutes, I shared with them the view out the window, and we traveled across the east of the United States, across the Atlantic, across Europe, the Mediterranean, and ended up at Madagascar. In those 20 minutes, they got to see the view outside of the cupola of our beautiful planet. And meanwhile, I learned about Matt's band, Rachel's dance, and what was going on in my wife's kindergarten class. And the dog was even there too. I mean, it was just a wonderful event for both sides and a great memory for the family.
And I have another question, thanks. Is the space station fully complete, or are there any other components to be added in the future?
Now that's a great question. It's sort of like, you know, my truck outside, you know, you always can add a new gadget to your truck. But for the most part, the design of the space station was completed in 2011. We still can take little pieces and parts up there, but for the most part, the house is built, and the additions are going to be if we redesign parts of the space station after 2028, when some of those designs come to their life. If we want to extend the life of the space station, that's when we might add on. But for now, it's pretty much complete.
Wonderful. Oh, there's another question. When you are on the space station, are you in zero gravity?
Technically, we're in what's called microgravity because zero gravity is sort of an impossible state to get to, but it's like 0.0000, lots of zeros, because you really don't feel the effects of gravity at all.
Great, and I think we have time for one more here, or I have a couple. What is the hardest part about becoming an astronaut?
Well, just like any STEM field, you need to be passionate about what you're doing. I started off, like I said, in math. I loved math. And then I learned to love science and engineering a little bit later. And probably technology came last of the STEM fields. But be passionate about it. Get excited about it. Ask lots of questions. And so for me, it was easy. It really wasn't work because I was doing things that I love to do. And STEM is really fun. And you can really get excited about it. Don't be scared of the math stuff. Get excited about it. We live in a rapidly changing digital world. And now more than ever, technology is important. And you know, as we all get more digitally fluent in this COVID quarantine, I think the world is going to be a better place because of it.
Well, I think we have time for a few closing words there, Greg.
Okay. Well, I want everybody to not lose hope. I started with my optimistic viewpoint of this COVID quarantine. I'm not optimistic. It's terrible. It's terrible for everyone. We're losing people's lives. We're losing conductivity, and our routines are never going to be the same. But I do think that every time our civilization has been tested, we come out the other side stronger. And so don't lose hope. Learn what you can. Your learning has been radically changed. So you're having to rely on technology to get those experiences and those little nuggets of knowledge. But this is going to pass, and we'll look back and we'll remember this really weird part of our existence, because these don't happen very often. So, you know, take it all in, learn what you can, be positive. Remember that you're part of a team, and how you conduct yourself can affect how people can survive in other countries. We're all globally connected, so everybody's got to do their part.
That is
We do
a
have
really
a couple
wonderful
more
message,
questions.
Greg, and thank you so much.
I can stay on for
Do we
a
have
couple
time
more
for a
questions.
couple more questions?
Absolutely.
Okay, we have some questions on Facebook. What courses in school would you recommend students take if you want to be an astronaut?
Well, first of all, take the courses that you love. That being said, right now, they are requiring astronauts to get a master's in a STEM-related field. That's new. It wasn't that way when I applied for the astronaut corps. So science, technology, and engineering, math, there's so many things that you can do, but pick one of those fields if you want to increase your chance of having a skill that is needed when we push on beyond the space station and start to colonize the moon and Mars.
We have 1 minute left.
You know, Matthew, I got to make a comment. As you speak, it kind of reminds me of Hal on 2001 Space Odyssey, because you've got a very soft voice and we can't see your face. I'm sorry to joke, but it's pretty funny.
I'm the voice in the sky, and that's what I was aiming for. So
you're doing a great job.
As a compliment.
And thank you so much. And by the way, thank you, Annalisa, and thank you, Barb, for all that you do for the Traverse Bay area and Newton's Road. You've really adjusted to this pandemic and quickly pivoted to help the community. And what you're doing is wonderful.
Thank you, Greg. So we want to take a moment to thank our sponsors, our partners, and our supporters. And if you have a spare sec, if you can share with us what you liked about today and any other things that you would like to learn about with us on STEM at Home Live with Newton's Road. We hope to see you again next week. We have actually this week on Thursday, 2 more shows, and every Tuesday and Thursday. There you go. So see you next time. And thanks again, Greg.
Thank you. I hope to see you all in person next month.